That's good. Okay, so we're on Design Leadership Season 3 Fire Session. Design Leadership and Resilience. So just a quick reminder that Design Leadership Masterclasses are happening in April. So it's going to be on the next year. We have Bruce Moore, Stephen Gates, Leslie Ann, Max Tito, Anna Rives, Emiliano Cintelli, Juliano Prosepio. So we're postponed for the April 3rd to the June 12th. We're going to have global master classes at 8 p.m. Sydney and local workshops Wednesday evenings in the specific region. So today on the Design Leadership Fire Session, we have our global design ambassador for APAC and EMEA, Joko Muratovicz, which is the director of futures, of digital futures at the King University. We also have with us Lisa Ishraun. Please, Lisa, correct me if I pronounce your name correctly. The head of School of Design at Queensland University of Technology, and Tamsin Griltlich. Whoa, that's another name, eh? Sorry, just let me know if I speak that correctly. Which you are the director of the School of X at Design Singapore Council. So guys, it's a pleasure to have you here at Echo's Design Leadership. I will pass the word now for Joko Muratovicz, our global ambassador. And yeah, it's a pleasure to have you all here. Joko, please, the word's with you.
Hey, thank you, Rico, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. So hello, Lisa and Tamsin, and it's really great to see you again. As Enrico said, the theme today is design leadership and resilience, and I'm particularly interested in exploring this topic from a female perspective. Design as a profession, historically speaking, has been predominantly male-dominated, and this is even more so the case when it comes to design leadership. You two are one of those very few women that have risen to such positions of leadership within the field. Building your career to such levels has taken a lot of resilience, and this is even more the case as women often have to deal with a range of issues that men typically don't. So both of you also live in foreign countries, which means that you do not have the traditional support systems that local people may have. And this in itself is an additional challenge. And this is also something that the three of us also share together. Now, Tamsin, you, if I'm correct, you relocated to Singapore from the UK. And Lisa, you moved from the US to UK, China, Singapore, and now Australia. Both of you have worked hard to get to where you're now, and you have been very successful in what you do. So let me ask you a few questions. And Tamsin, we can start with you, but the questions will apply to both of you. So tell us briefly about your career journey and how did you arrive to your current position?
Morning, everyone. And I just want to actually quickly say well done to Enrico, because you had the most complicated list of names probably ever in an introduction. Yeah, thank you, Joko. My journey is definitely a meandering one. And I think I realized with age that that's brought the benefits that allowed me to grow. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and secretly I still don't. I feel I'm still on that growth journey of exploration. And I've been on an interesting journey. And I often say that 5 years from now, I will be doing a job that doesn't exist today, because that's been the pattern of my entire career. I started in local government. I graduated with a master's degree in environmental technology from Imperial College. So nothing to do with design, but very much to do with complex adaptive systems and understanding interconnectedness. And I believe that I came to design both because I had a creative background, but I love science, I love complexity. And I love looking at interconnections. So for me, really, the journey to design started, I guess, through seeing patterns in complexity, which we know in design, we're looking for patterns. And then also fell into design through my journey, starting in local government, then central government, and looking at solving complex challenges to do with the environment and health. And then I moved into the telecom sector, and more my journey was around solving complex stakeholder issues where you may have protest groups trying to resist a new development, even though many of the stakeholders wanted the new development. They were unhappy at the way it was being implemented, designed. They didn't feel empowered or involved in the conversations. So my journey into design has been through the ugly mess of unhappy people, and using design as a way of bringing people together to co-design solutions really on a complex systems level. So I've never been in the glamorous, sexy end of the design world. I've always been in the grubby need end, but to me, the really important end where genuinely we've solved big issues that matter to people. I played a role in transforming the way telecoms industry rolls out its networks, so created the guidance that the UK mobile industry uses and the Australian industry as well, in fact. And from then eventually ended up setting up an innovation company with my husband in the north of England, where we looked at more of these complex urban kind of issues and human-centered issues. So yeah, I ended up in Singapore around 10 years ago, having just concluded the largest civil engineering project in the UK at the time, moved to Singapore and just tried to explore something new. It's when I joined National University of Singapore, established something called the Smart Health Leadership Centre, and again, looking at human-centered design with digital and data to transform health outcomes. So in a nutshell, that was the journey. I'm now at Design Singapore Council, trying to put design as a complex problem-solving tool into the hands of anyone that wants to learn it. Yeah, so meandering.
That's amazing. Well, I can see, like how your experience has helped you to build that level of resilience, especially when you work on this type of challenging projects. You certainly get resilience along the way. Lisa, how about you? How about your journey?
Yeah, very similar to Tamsin. It's a long meandering story that crosses many countries and continents. But I started out in the US from New York. And I knew from relatively young age, I wanted to travel and live outside of the US and explore other cultures and countries. So that was my main goal when I went to university. I didn't care what I studied as long as I got to live outside of the US. And I ended up, I was very much into art and music when I went to university. And I ended up in the graphic design program. I went to a small university in Florida, and they had just started that program. And they said, you'd be a perfect fit. And I ended up really loving graphic design as a profession. And I finished my degree, my undergrad, and worked in the political advertising in Florida. That was interesting. To say the least, during the election of Gore and Bush. And that was a very interesting election in Florida. So after I finished that, I promptly left the United States and moved to London to do my master's in design studies, where I worked with the course was with a range of designers from all different disciplines from around the world. And it was a very interesting course in that I met people with all different perspectives from not only different disciplines, but also different global perspectives. And on the back of that, I went and worked in, as Tamsin said, the glamorous part of the design industry, which was in interior design for an American company in London. And although it was very glamorous, going to very wealthy people's homes and choosing their drapes and their color schemes and coming up with design plans, I had realized at that point that my passion was for social design and solving problems with design. So I decided to look for other opportunities, and it was then I was offered a job in Shanghai teaching design. So I went off to China, which was once again very eye-opening experience. China was going through this amazing transition. So I would walk by buildings that would be demolished the next day, and the city was transforming itself. And my students were really excited about the possibilities of design and how their society was being transformed. So I decided that I loved working in higher education. I'd continue working in higher education. So I applied for PhD programs and ended up in Australia at the QCA in Brisbane, where I completed my PhD, and then promptly finished and got a job at Deakin, where Joko is now, and worked in Melbourne for a couple of years, and then moved to Canberra, the federal capital, to work in Canberra at University of Canberra for 8 years, and then was offered a job back in Queensland, in Brisbane, which is kind of my Australian hometown, my first port that I arrived in. So now I'm heading up the design school at QUT, which has been a fantastic challenge, a great design school with a range of disciplines, and really interesting projects. And close to my heart is social design, but particularly design for health and well-being. And that's what brought me to meet Tamsin, who I sort of cold emailed when I was going to do a sabbatical in Singapore in 2017, and said, I love what you're doing, and let's meet up. And we've formed a long friendship since then, and a collaboration that continues to this day. We were just in Singapore together for Design Week, running design and health workshops with the Tan Tock Seng Hospital.
Cool.
So that's in a nutshell.
Well, that's great. I mean, the interesting thing about both of your journeys is that it's clearly not a straight line, and that it's a journey. That's for sure. Now, based on this experience, I guess, not only in terms of working on these complex problems and complex projects that are very different and that they constantly keep changing. And you've been also changing the countries, you've been changing cultures, you've been changing environments. How has this informed your leadership style? And how would you say it differs to your male counterparts? Lisa, maybe you can also answer that, and then Tamsin can add in.
That's an interesting and multi-layered question.
It is. So we can unpack it a little bit.
Yes,
so let's say, how is your leadership style? How did your leadership style? How did you inform your leadership style based on these things? How would you describe, let's say, your leadership style?
Well, I think, look, traveling so much and going to different places, it's like every time you enter into another country, you have to learn about that culture. You can't go in and apply all the things you know about your own country onto that country, because you'll get upset and angry at all the things that don't follow your perspective from where you're from. So any institution is like a country onto themselves. It's their own culture. So when you enter into it, you have to learn about it, and you have to be open to learn about it and to understand that particular culture. So I've always kind of come with that approach. It's like, you know, and I'll say that of all the countries I've lived, one of the most challenging places to go was the UK, because I had felt it was very similar to the US. Is that they speak English there, we're similar cultures, but every small difference was, you know, heightened because I had expected everyone to understand me immediately. And so that's the same when you go into any kind of role in an institution. You can't even apply the same things in the institutions that you came from before, because every culture is a culture unto itself. So I've always tried to approach it with that kind of curiosity, as if I'm going into a new country and I'm learning about that new country. I'm learning about how people function. So I don't go in like guns blazing, like, hey, I'm going to change you. I'm going to do everything my way because my way is the right way, because I find that just puts everybody offside. It's the same as if, you know, I'm American and I have a great reputation for when we travel. So if I went into a country and said, this is not America, everybody gets pissed off with you. So I try to do the same thing in a leadership role, where I don't go in telling everybody what to do from my perspective because I'm the leader. I try to learn about people, what they're about, and then make it like sort of co-design a plan together, how we're going to drive the organization further. Because otherwise I feel it's hard to get the buy-in. But in the
sorry. No, I was wondering, do you see any difference in terms of your leadership style compared to your male counterparts? Well, I have been your male counterpart for a long time. We've been working, you know, like quite a lot. We know each other for a long time, but I know we are very, very similar in some ways. So I mean, this is a general question.
Yeah, I mean, if I was comparing to your leadership journey, I mean, interestingly, you and I met each other. We were both like baby academics, like very junior, like in our career journey, and we've taken different pathways, but very like a similar trajectory, but in different ways. And I suppose every time I had to move to a different place, it was a lot of negotiation, you know, because for me, like, it is the same for you, but possibly different. It's a lot about the whole community and my family particularly. So I'm always trying to find the best possible solution for my family and their setup. And that becomes complicated as your kids start in school, and my child has special needs. So I always have to think about like how I'm going to set him up in a school, and that weighs on me, very, very much. So I guess it's not that my male counterparts don't think about those things, but it may not be as front and center. Like I'm always having multiple balls in the air. It's like the mom, the wife, the teacher. I think it's all these kind of, and I tend to, with the staff in my school, we act like a family, and I treat everyone that I care deeply about the area that I oversee, as well as I care about my family and the community. But sometimes that level of care can be exhausting. And, that's why it's something that I constantly have to balance out, my energy level and how you actually can put that level of care into people. Because I can see if I put that level of care into people, the outcome is amazing. It's just that over time you can get worn down from being everybody's, kind of over, like putting that much effort into caring for people. But I think that's what I can see that's a bit different from my style and sometimes my male counterparts, is that kind of level of care that I put into every one of my staff members and my son and his school and the teachers and keeping all that rolling, which can be quite exhausting. And not to say that my husband helps me out a lot. He's amazing, but he's also working full time. And I think he's not often thinking of it in that way that I do. But that's
I see.
My perspective.
Yeah. Tamsin, how about you?
A lot of resonance. It is a multi-layered question. It brings so many thoughts to my mind. I'm trying to focus in on some things. And I would agree with a lot of what Lisa has said there. I think one of the things, my journey, which was both working on very complex and contentious projects in the UK, where we had a lot of change resistance, a lot of protesters, I have had to develop a very thick skin, but my natural personality is to be very caring, similar as Lisa has said. So there's that constant balance of how you are tough yet vulnerable, caring yet firm, because when you're working on very big complex engineering projects, things have to be done by certain times. You can't be fluffy and soft. You have to be firm and soft. You can't be weak and allow horrible backstabbing to get to you. You have to be strong, but also be vulnerable, because I really do believe in vulnerability helping to build trust. So it's interesting to me that when I look at some of the differences between myself and some of my male counterparts, I think that willingness to be vulnerable is something that they struggle with, perhaps because the way we are stereotyped. Women are expected to be vulnerable, and women are expected to be very open about their emotions, and men not so much. But I deliberately role model that to my team so that they know it's okay to make mistakes. They know it's okay to say, actually, I'm scared about doing this, because if they can talk about it, I can help to coach them. And I guess I've grown to realize over the years that I do love to coach my team. I hadn't really been conscious of it. And a number of people observed and said, you really are a coach, aren't you? You're perfect in your job. And I thought, not really, no, I don't think I am at all. And I guess as I look back over my whole career, it's always been about nurturing others and helping them to achieve more than they think they can. So I think I was thinking back when I was thinking about today's chat, back to my very first role as a fresh graduate, and we were running towards a huge event that I had come up with an idea for. It was a big one that ran across the whole organization. I clearly had no idea what I'd signed myself up to do. And suddenly, 2 weeks before this major event, we had a young work experience girl, 16 years old, I was told I had to look after her for 3 weeks. And she was terrified. She was so shy. But you know what? I used to be a really, really shy child as well. I was so shy that if anyone spoke to me, I would go bright red and I would never speak. So I felt that empathy has followed me and that vulnerability. So I shared to her, I bet you're feeling really nervous about what we need to do now. I'm going to give you some tools to help you. I need you to phone these people. And I know that feels scary. Here's how to take the conversation. I'm going to be sitting right across the table from you. If anything, here's your get out card. You can just say this. And so because I could relate to what I saw in her, I was able to help build her. The transformation of this young woman was absolutely phenomenal, so much so that the principal of the school came in to see us after the placement and said, her transformation is incredible. She's like a different person. Her confidence has grown. So I guess that was always in me. And I do see that that is my leadership style. It's the harder one. And as Lisa mentioned, it can be exhausting because the easier thing is just to tell people to get a piece of work done and just expect them to do it. Whereas I try to look at the individual, at the long-term goals of our team and say, how do I really help build you so you can deliver? So ultimately, and I know Lisa shares the same thing, I try to write myself out of a job in everything I do. How eventually do I get to the point where I can write myself out of the job? And I only do that to create that lasting impact by building my team and allowing them to go forward. So I think that vulnerability to build the trust so people can share more openly, that empathy, which has been born from my own insecurities and experiences, and that desire to coach and grow people. But one last thing, and I think, you know, something that Lisa said reminded me that there's that need to be agile. So that need to say, I see what's happening, and either I'm seeing what's happening and we need to adjust our course, or we're reacting to something. And that building agility into the way you lead, I feel, is also really important, and something I guess I inherently do, but can feel uncomfortable for some.
I see what I'm getting from both of you is that both of your leadership styles are very nurturing in some ways, and I think I have noticed that trait with other female leaders I had an opportunity to talk about over the years. So it's a very interesting trait that keeps coming up in conversations, and I think this is probably one of the things that that makes female leadership a little bit different to male leadership. Not that male leaders cannot be nurturing, but it is not something that naturally comes to most people in these positions. What would you say is the most significant barrier to female leadership, Tamsin?
Okay.
In your particular case, let's say.
Yeah, in my particular case, for me personally, I probably would start with myself. As I mentioned, I was a really shy child. When my parents would go to teacher meetings, the teachers would always say, if only Tamsin would learn to speak. Okay, I did that eventually. But I was terrified of speaking, and I doubted myself all the time. And as I went into the working world, I really just assumed that everyone else who was so confident knew 100% what they were talking about. And because I still had questions, I thought maybe this shows that I don't know as much as they do. Maybe this shows that I'm not smart enough to be here, that my opinion isn't as good as theirs. And it took me a while to realize, actually, some of the confidence is just a representation of confidence for the sake of it. Sometimes we need to act confident. Sometimes the world needs to see confidence because we all have questions. And in fact, the more we know, the more questions we have. So I realized that actually the questions I was asking myself, what I was seeing as doubts, weren't so much doubts, but rather that natural curiosity, that natural sense of having a risk radar and trying to understand things a bit better, and that recognition that the world is not black and white. There's a million shades of grey, and there are many, many, many ways of solving any challenge and many causes of complex issues. So I guess the questions I was asking myself, I initially thought of as doubts, and that did definitely hold me back. I wasn't so bold to step forward. I overcame that. But there were other things, I guess, that I learned to deal with, and this is where the resilience part came in. Particularly as a young woman, I was often responsible for serving legal notices. I remember one time walking onto a building site. I was wearing a skirt and heels, and the cacophony that followed me of wolf whistles and leering shouts. And I thought, wow, my male colleagues never can understand this. And I had a conversation. I mean, it was a great power twist because I could say, good afternoon, gentlemen. I'd like to serve notice. I'm afraid I have to ask you to stop working immediately. So shut up. Yeah. But nonetheless, you have to be strong to walk through that and have all eyes on you and just really keep your composure. And I thought, yeah, my male counterparts do not have to face that generally. So there are certain things. And I remember speaking to some male, colleagues a while back, and the way they spoke about the freedom of what they could wear, the freedom in the way they could act, I thought actually women, as you know, as society has positioned us, it's still hard for us to be taken seriously. And one final example, I ran a workshop recently, very, very successful, with a number of leaders. And at the end of the workshop, one of the guys was chatting to me, and it started very professionally, but it soon disintegrated into, you know what men find most attractive about women? It's hair that falls beneath the shoulders. And I just thought, wow. And I just replied to him, yeah, this is normally why I have my hair tied up, actually, because focus on me and what I'm doing rather than the way I look. So we still have this visual bias to overcome. There's this societal expectation that we should look a certain way. And a colleague of mine was once told she should wear, this is in a different organization, she should start wearing makeup to work and wearing heels because clients prefer to see that. And I feel this is the narrative we need to change. I've worked hard to be taken seriously for the way my brain works rather than the way I look. But we still fight against that. And I think that's a big difference that men can't even begin to imagine, actually. But yeah, Lisa, I don't know how that compares to yours.
I would say I agree with you. And I think that those are really good examples, particularly in like male dominated industries when you were working with, you know, construction managers and things like that. I come from a family, I have 4 brothers and they're all builders. So I get what you're saying. I've been to their building sites. I've worked in education now, probably going on 15 years, 16 years. And education is a mix. You know, you have quite a lot of women, and particularly at the lower, it's harder for women to escalate up to the higher levels, like up until to the chancellery. They're few and far between once they get past senior lecturer, for various reasons, some being we have children and then we just can't meet the metrics that are imposed upon us in academia, which is tough. Then I have to say that the women that have got up there, I've met some brilliant leaders, but sometimes it's the women, which may be quite controversial, that actually put me down more than men. And I find that there's a style of leadership, and women that have got there, you know, they've fought hard and they're another generation above me. They've got there and I'm grateful that they're there. They're at the table. But sometimes that sort of getting up there has meant they've taken some of the worst qualities and the things that we don't like in male leadership and then imposed it onto other women, as if like we have to go through a rite of passage to get to that. And so I've found sometimes in my career that there's some women that have like really put me down, unnecessarily so, because they're trying to maybe react to or mimic a style of leadership that they think that they need to do to be at that table. So I find too that women can also be equally crushing to other women in the scenarios where they don't have to be. And that's why in my teams, I've always been like, I want you to be as good as me and better. I'm trying to make you better than me. I'm not trying to put you down because you haven't gone through the same journey as me. We all have different pathways. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of my observation in a way, slightly on another angle, that there are women in power that often put other women down, and that can lead to detrimental effects.
Both of you have raised some very, very interesting points. And listening particularly to this, what you said, I have noticed the same characteristics sometimes with members of underrepresented minorities that have often made it through the ranks. It has not been an easy journey for them. It has been probably extremely excruciating journey, like you have seen, to get to this position. And over time, it causes the opposite effect. You know, sometimes I have seen this. So it's not like you're now in this position, but then when you see somebody like you trying to get to the same spot, you become extremely like defensive because you know what you had to go through to get there. And in some way, rather than helping other people, rather than raising other people like you along the way, people sometimes become like gatekeepers. And the reason for that is because they understand that the table doesn't have enough chairs for people like them. So they're, you know, so they're preserving their own seat at the table rather than looking for ways how to make the table bigger. And I think that this is often, is this one of those unwanted effects when people who have not necessarily had a seat at the table eventually get to the table. I've seen this happening, you know, from male, not only from female, but when they're usually coming from areas like from underrepresented communities and, you know, in positions where you don't typically see them. And it's quite unfortunate when that happens. I'm trying to be very conscious about that, you know, myself. I'm often a minority, you know, in the places where I am. I live in foreign countries, speak different languages and all that. So I try to be very, very extra conscious when I see other people coming with similar backgrounds to mine, to try to pave the way, because many have not done that for me, you know, so I'm very conscious of that. And Tamsin, you also made some very interesting comments, which reminded me when you were saying that of a very interesting encounter I had in Portugal a few months ago. I actually spent some time with this lovely lady who was a social worker studying, doing her PhD in design, but in her, she also has a part-time job teaching in prisons. And for me, it was very interesting, like, because she's very feminine, very, very lovely lady, you know, and I was like wondering, how do you deal with like male prisoners? Because she essentially teaches in male prisons, you know, things. And it was very interesting to get her perspective, that how her whole persona has to change the moment she set foot in the prison, and how she needs to stand, how she needs to talk, how she needs to handle the situation. And it was very interesting. It's like she explaining this transformation that she has to undertake when she kind of takes on that role, which kind of was wondering, it sounded very much like when you step into the corporate setting, you know, you also have to all of a sudden assume a whole different personality. So it was very interesting from just hearing that. So thank you both for sharing these experiences. What generally motivated both of you to step up and take on leadership positions? Like, is this something that has come naturally to you in your career path, or is this at some point there was something that said, like, I should step up and do this because I think that I can do a better job if I'm in a leadership position?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, it's a little bit of both. I think I never started out to think I wanted to be actually in academia or in a head of school role or anything like that. I think what led me here was curiosity, and that idea that I love that in academia you can always look at different things and you can make really amazing projects happen and you can get amazing people together in the same room. But the system itself can sometimes be limiting. And I think that when I was going through the ranks in academia, I could see how I could improve the system if I was in a higher leadership role. And that kind of drove me to where I am now, because I thought, okay, I know how I can influence the best out of people. And at first it was smaller teams and I could put teams together. And then I thought, if I could, you know, control bigger teams and, you know, I could actually make more of an impact with a larger team. So that's what kind of led me up the ranks in academia, because I could see how getting more people on board and bringing out their strengths in the way that Tamsin talks about, coaching people to see what they're good at and then get them working on something they're passionate about. And at the end game is that we're influencing the leaders of the future in our industry. We're educating the designers of the future. And that to me is very powerful. And every time I get annoyed with bureaucracy, which happens a lot in universities, think about that. Our end goal is to foster these leaders in the future for our country and to make our country better. And if I help the people in my team, if I get the best out of them and they can see their strengths, then we're all in an ecosystem that can, you know, get us out of some of the complex and very, very challenging issues that we have at the moment in the world. That's what gets me up. It gets me waking up every day with like a smile on my face and go, I can take this on. yeah, it wasn't like the natural thing, like I need to be the leader. It was more like, okay, I can see that if I get to a higher position, I can influence more people and I can get them along and we can actually change parts of the system that aren't functioning.
Tamsin, how about you?
Sorry, I've just suddenly gone dark. I have a new laptop which has an interesting light setting, but anyway, I'll come back. I think for me, it really is about creating collective impact. I'm really driven by impact and making a difference. And so leadership kind of happened because I can't make the world a better place on my own. I need others to journey with me. So for me, I guess I'm kind of an accidental leader. I wasn't motivated by the hierarchy of the rank at all. It really, because it brings a lot of responsibility, caring for and keeping an eye on so many people and allowing each of them to grow and fulfill their potential. It's a lot of work, but you do it because you see where it's taking the mission. So if I look at, for example, my previous role, the Smart Health Leadership Centre, I joined National University of Singapore just as a lecturer, as a faculty member, looking to build something. I saw an opportunity and went to my CEO and said, I think we can really do something powerful for the health sector. And I put forward a proposal and he said, sure, go ahead, do what you think we need to do. So I set up the Smart Health Leadership Centre deliberately with no funding and no staff because I wanted no KPIs on my shoulders. I didn't want anyone saying, we need a return on our investment. So here's $3 million, but you must do X, Y, and Z. I knew that to create impact, I needed to be freed up of that. So I said, I'll do this in my own time, no staff, no money. The only way the Smart Health Leadership Centre will grow is if we have a strong value proposition. So I'm forced to focus on my value proposition. It will only grow because people will pay me to teach, to do research, and to do consulting, and we start with me. And it grew and it grew and it grew. The value proposition was validated in that way. So I didn't set out saying, I want to run a great big centre. I grew because I saw we could make a difference. I genuinely believed that. And people wanted to be part of it. As it grew, people were queuing up from other departments as well, saying we want to come and be part of this. They were asking to transfer into the team. So as I say, this was accidental leadership. I didn't come in leading the centre. I grew the centre and people kept wanting to come. So it's actually the same as School of X now. School of X has a small head count, but I have a list of people desperate to come and join. So they're finding different ways. They're volunteering. They're coming on attachment. They're joining our facilitation panel. So when people see that there's this mission and it's making a difference and they're excited by it, you bring a movement together. And so I think my leadership journey has been the accidental leader, yeah. It kind of so happens that people they buy into the vision that I can see and they want to make a difference too. And I love to grow people to create that difference together. So it becomes self-feeding. So the nature of it, I guess you keep taking bigger roles because you can have more impact. So my current side hobby is that I'm leading the organizational transformation of Design Singapore Council. So again, that's now within the organization, building a team of change warriors within Design Singapore Council to really transform the council to make different impacts in the future. So that's a similar journey currently taking place, yeah.
Interesting. I like that, by the way, change warriors somehow resonates very interestingly, especially in a large organizational setting where change is often very hard. Interesting thing that, that also, well, another thing that I also want to talk about is dealing with stress. Now, leadership positions, whether when it involves women or men, they are full of stress. And I wonder, how do you deal with stress? Tamsin, how do you deal with stress?
I'm asked that question fairly often, almost as much as I'm asked, where do you get your energy from and how do you avoid burnout? So I guess they're all kind of interrelated. For me, the very simplest answer is I love running. Running for me is therapy. I'm an anti-social runner. I'm not part of a gang of runners. I run out my arguments in my head. I get through the first couple of kilometers with lung burning and think, oh, this happened. And then I get into my flow and into a rhythm and into my breathing. And it's the space I create for myself to think. So it's the space where I make sure I don't react emotionally to things when something's affected me. It gives me the clarity to think. when I feel that someone has behaved inappropriately in whatever way, it gives me that space to try to understand where they may have been coming from. So running makes me, I guess, calm down and see the bigger pictures, and it's very therapeutic for me. So that's a very practical way, but I've always suffered from insomnia. My brain is just permanently jumping all over the place, and insomnia is something that I've struggled with for most of my life. So I've had to teach myself techniques to help me sleep, because otherwise my brain would just be running. So I do different things at night. I have rituals, and one of the rituals that I have is that I write a gratitude journal every night, 1 page of A5 written with a really nice calligraphy pen every single night. What am I grateful for today? And this also helps me deal with stress, because as well as allowing me to have this ritual, it's bedtime, go to sleep brain, it also means that if you have had a tough day, and sometimes we do, sometimes we have those days where everything feels like it's gone wrong, the world is against you, it allows you to just pause and say, you know, but also this happened, and you know what, I had a coffee and someone did this, and even no matter how micro those gratitudes are, it means that every single day I go to bed feeling good about life. So that to me has helped me a lot to deal with stress. It helps me really enjoy my life. And it helps me fall asleep most critically. So yeah, I think these are probably 2 of my biggest things, the running and the gratituding. So yeah, I guess that's me.
Good, nice techniques. Yeah, the gratitude writing, I'm familiar with that technique. I tried it myself even on some occasions. Not as disciplined as you though. I should probably do that more often.
Yeah, you need the treat. I get myself a specially bound book. It's called, I call it my Happitude journal, because it's the happy gratitude journal, and then I write it with a really good pen, and it feels like my evening treat. So yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah,
very nice. The power of rituals. Lisa, how about you? How do you deal with stress?
Sometimes I don't deal with it very well, but I also think that I continually change the formula. So yes, I also do exercise, and I write in a journal, but it changes for me. Like I love also playing the piano or reading different things. But I was thinking, like, consistently what I do is, since I was very young, my younger brother and I used to just draw out our problems. So when we were angry at something, we'd make a cartoon about it, and we tell each other a story and make it into something funny and fun. So like, I realized that I continue to do that as an adult. I don't necessarily always draw it out, but I look at the situation in a way that it's like a story, because when you think about it, that it's all encompassing, it can never be solved. When you start that storytelling about it, and actually sometimes it all falls away and it's not as bad. And so during some of the most challenging leadership change management things I had to do, particularly in 2020, our school broke apart. I remember just sitting, and I gravitate towards colleagues that have really great sense of humor. So that's why I'm friends with both of you guys. But we were sitting down, I was sitting down with my colleague Yvonne, who leads the design lab. We're talking about how insane it was that we were in this situation, but then we just made up a story about the situation, and we were like laughing, we were crying laughing because of the story we'd made up, and like how ludicrous it was that we were upset about this. So I think when you're in those situations where like nothing makes sense, like make it into a story that, you know, can put characters to things, and it actually goes, you know what, we can solve this. This is not that dire, you know, of a problem. So I tend to, have lots of networks and friends that have a good sense of humor, that when I'm struggling with something, I can, you know, talk to them and go, okay, it's not that bad.
Yeah, we had many conversations with each other on topics like that when we were dealing with very similar issues.
Actually, Lisa, but you've reminded me of another thing, and sorry, Joko, to jump in, but friendship is also a really powerful way for me to deal with stress. And so it's true. I know that when I've had some tough times, I may have messaged Lisa and said, oh, sorry, I need to talk some things through. And I'm so grateful that I have this incredible network of friends around the world. So without the friendship, I think it's much tougher. I can talk to people who have my back, people I trust, people I know I can be myself and just say, it's tough being a leader sometimes because it can be lonely. You can't always socialize with your team in the way that you could when you weren't leading them. And sometimes you just need to be able to reach out to someone who knows you as a friend and say, oh, I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a great day. And that is so important. So having that friendship network, I think it's important to nurture it. So yes, here's to friends and here's to good humor too.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been like that for Lisa and me, you know, like sometimes I feel, because we were both heads of schools at the same time and into different countries, but sometimes I was feeling that it's only another counterpart of mine that is also a friend of mine, can understand some of the decisions and the challenges that I have to deal with and decisions I have to make, and that sometimes, you know, the people who work for you, they just can't understand. And it's been very helpful, like especially when we were dealing with COVID-19 lockdowns that just came very suddenly, and we had to transform our organizations literally overnight in ways that have never been done before. So for me personally, it was very helpful that I could just call Lisa and just get her thoughts on stuff, and you know, use her as a sounding board, and vice versa. We had many back and forth conversations, just trying to essentially help each other navigate through difficult times, you know. Yeah, so this is all very interesting. So I actually quite enjoy hearing how you both deal with these situations. Did you had mentors or role models along the way that helped you shape your leadership style? That's another thing I'm interested in hearing. How about Lisa? How about you?
I think I've had many people that I admired, leaders that I saw doing, you know, like I wanted to mirror the way they were leading. But if I would say like one person, and it's maybe just kind of obvious, but my mother. So my mother worked the whole time I was growing up, and she had 5 kids. So she managed 5 children and working. And at times I could see my mother was frazzled. Now looking back, I'm like, how the heck did she do that? But she always, you know, showed us a lot of care, a lot of love. And I think that, you know, without that strong foundation of a mother who, you know, kept her career going and did an awesome job in her career, like she was one of the head teachers at her school. She's a primary school teacher. And so she had to go every day, take care of, you know, 5-year-olds, teach them how to read, and then come home and look after a bunch of unruly teenage boys. It was a hard job, but she did a great job. And I think that seeing my mother doing that, I knew I could do something. I could go far. I could have a career. I could, you know, have it all, like people say, but I could still do it with a level of humility that my mother did. So I think for me, my mom is like one of my, you know, sort of leadership heroes. But I've had, many amazing like managers or colleagues. I mean, the two of you have been very, you know, I see what you guys do in your roles, and it's been, you know, very influential. And I always have, you know, sounding boards of people I can see, like Tamsin and I in Singapore, we're having a great chat about like our mutual challenges and going, oh, you know, it's just, so there's many, many people I admire and that I've had, you know, wonderful like learning experiences from. But I think it does start from like my early foundations of like seeing my mother working while I was, you know, managing a big family and everything else, all the pressures that go along with it.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Tamsin,
awesome.
How about you?
I think for me, actually in the early part of my career, I didn't really have that many female role models, but I do remember in my first job after university, there was a senior female leader. As I say, I was focused on the environmental space, and she was quite senior in that side. And I did really look up to her. She was the only female role model I guess I had in a working, in a professional sense. I looked at the way she was very calm, she was very firm, but somehow kind and encouraging. But I didn't work so closely with her. But I was grateful for the fact that she could see me, she would encourage me, she would ask me to speak up. But I think I did find it hard because I was looking for that female role model. I was looking for how best do I conduct myself in the workplace. And almost always I've been in male-dominated environments. And the males I've worked with have been wonderful. I mean, generally, okay, the vast majority have been absolutely wonderful. And I would say I've had some great indirect mentorship from some of those males. So I'm really grateful for that experience. But the great thing and the encouraging thing is that there are more and more inspiring role models who are female now that I can also look to. So I think that's grown. It is interesting to me, as Lisa had mentioned earlier, that there are some women in leadership positions that clearly also haven't had that female role model. They are role modeling themselves in some of the worst male behaviors. There are so many great, empathetic, kind, compassionate male leaders, and yet for some women, I have seen them role modeling that horrible, scolding, kind of domineering behavior. But I've been grateful actually in Singapore. We have a lot of women in leadership positions here, I feel, and I've really learned a lot from them and continue to grow that network. So I think not so much my early career, but it gets stronger the longer I go on. And I make a real commitment to all the interns and the people that have worked for me that I continue to guide them and mentor them as best I can from afar. So I now have a global network of young women that I still engage with on a very regular basis and guide them, because I recognize that was really, I guess, quite absent from my earlier career. So hopefully that machine is growing.
Nice. Well, thank you both for that. We are now coming closer to the end of our session, and I would like to see if anyone from our guests would like to ask any questions, or if they have any questions or comments for you. So any one of our visitors today, if you would like to join, feel free to unmute yourself.
Please speak up.
Yeah, we left you speechless. I know.
Lisa and I both love chatting to people, so don't be intimidated.
No, that's fine. Otherwise,
that's good, because it means that everything's pretty clear.
Yeah, so then maybe then I will ask then the final question. Let me see. There we go. We have a question from Erin. Best advice for coaching junior designers and fostering a creative environments virtually. Anyone, Tamsin or Lisa, would you like to?
I mean, I'm thankful that we're back out of the virtual space, but we did have many years online because of the pandemic, and in academia that was very tough. So when we were going through that, and many staff in my school had never taught anything online, so that was very challenging, and we couldn't even see each other. Some of the things that I employed to try to motivate them and to get them to understand that I was listening and caring is I would have sometimes, like, one-on-one, like quick Zooms with them. I had a weekly touch base on Zoom with the whole school, where we did sort of fun things. We had a llama bomb at one point where some llamas joined us online, which was just random, but we tried to mimic like what you would do in a workplace sometimes on Zoom. But also at one point when it was very difficult and people were doing things that they hadn't normally had to do, I did actually send out each person in our school a thank you note for what they had done. And I actually wrote what they did. So I said, thank you for, putting this particular course online when I know how challenging it was. Thank you for, and I posted it to their home address, and people were just so grateful that I recognized, and I took the time to recognize the actual bits and pieces that they were doing, instead of being just like a face on a Zoom, or even, sometimes people are so tired, they don't even want their face on Zoom. So they just put a screen up. So I was trying to get people to engage and understand that I was engaging.
Amazing.
Tamsin, anything you want to
I think I everything Lisa said, I resonate with it and would agree. And I think, gosh, isn't it so nice that we don't have to do everything virtually anymore, but we still can. And I know that I joined Design Singapore Council right at the start of the pandemic. We were in our strictest lockdown, so I had to bond with my team remotely. And actually in our organization, we for some reason have quite a lot of introverts. So it was exactly that. It was the black screen. And I know it's intimidating and I know it's intrusive. I said, guys, I feel like I'm sitting on my own in a dark room. Where are you all? Slowly they turn on the cameras grudgingly. And I think that eye contact, it's not real eye contact, but you feel that sense of connection. So that's me. It's very interesting now when I look at my team. We still have a lot of online meetings, of course. When you come into the School of X, everyone just automatically turns their cameras on. I never, ever have. It's just cameras on. We're chatting. It's very fluid. But when I go into other team meetings, it's still very often a bit quiet, cameras off. So I feel that was a deliberate and conscious effort. I said, we need to connect. And in terms of how we can still stimulate creativity or foster creativity, even online, I've been told by my team and by a lot of people that I ask difficult questions and not uncomfortable. Well, actually uncomfortable. Someone said to me, I was proud of this actually. I spoke to a very senior design leader and he said, Tamsin, we need you because you always ask the questions that we don't want to answer. You ask the difficult, awkward questions that need answering but make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. But he said they're the questions that force us to think differently. And I know I do that to my team. And we were just doing an exit interview for someone who sadly has to leave us just yesterday. And she said, the questions you ask just make me think differently and open up my mind. So I guess that's how we do it. I don't scold, I don't instruct really. I certainly don't scold, but I don't instruct. I tend to ask questions and that helps people to think. And when they think, they just open up different possibilities. So we don't always need to be fancy when we're trying to foster creativity. We sometimes can just ask the simple question we ask in the School of X all the time, who cares? So I'll be a bit provocative sometimes with the questions I ask, and sometimes that stimulates quite interesting debate. So yeah, do the unexpected, trigger some curiosity, and that I think can help foster the creativity as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's a really nice comment to end our session as well. So yeah, thank you both. And thank you, Enrico, for hosting us. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Yeah. Very much enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that everyone got something valuable out of this. So thank you again for today.
Amazing.
And I look forward to seeing you again on another occasion soon.
Amazing. So thank you guys, appreciate it. Joko, thank you. Lisa, Tamsin, and everyone that was connected. If you have any questions around the topic, please leave the comments on the chat box that will be on chat box on the comment section on the YouTube channel, and or the respective podcast channels that this interview will go. And yeah, we're going to get back to you. So thank you very much. So thank you again, Joko, our global ambassador. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Tamsin. And thank everyone that came to here today. And looking forward to see you next time on the next Design Leadership session. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.